cute.
Tragedy, sex, and Superman.
It's a bird.
It's a plane.
No, look, it's...
What are the odds that a movie from a legendary franchise that already has planned sequels would not only double its earnings at the box office, but also get solid reviews by critics, only to have the studio that owns it shut it down faster than a speeding bullet?
Really?
In an industry like Hollywood, where sequels to financially successful movies are the law of the land, the odds are nearly zero.
Never?
Look no further than 2007's Ghost Rider, which, despite being considered universally bad,
Let's ride.
earned 3 times its budget, and voila! Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance is made.
Face was a skull, and it was on fire.
On fire.
Yeah, like...
Or how about 2016's Suicide Squad, whose moviegoers doubled its budget but walked out of theaters wondering why the trailer was better than the movie.
What?
Its sequel, The Suicide Squad, was made 5 years later and literally added "the" to the name in hopes of covering up their earlier abomination.
Think there's any connection?
No.
So with that in mind, how exactly does a legend like Superman crack the box office only to have the studio shut down the money printing machine and tell everyone, sorry, the future has been canceled?
The world doesn't need a savior.
A movie that would continue the cinematic story that had ended 25 years earlier with an actor nearly identical in looks to his contemporary and perhaps the best Lex Luthor to ever be cast.
So did you get your rock?
I did.
With a director who literally just finished making 2 movies that literally revitalized and paved the way for modern superhero movies.
We're here to stay, Mr. President.
How in the HE double hockey sticks do you screw this one up?
Gil, how many F's are there in catastrophic?
None.
There's an old saying, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And something tells me this story is brimming with ingredients for making asphalt. And with that, we have some questions. Did the director cast an unknown into the lead role because he was a great actor or because he looked like Christopher Reeve? What inspired the team to hire a 22-year-old actress to play a 38-year-old Lois Lane with a 6-year-old kid? Was the studio really at fault, or did the director drag his feet on a sequel because of his other projects? And most importantly, more than 20 years later, was the movie really a failure? Or could it actually be responsible for the creation of something better? Well, you are about to find out, because this is the definitive history of Superman Returns, the failed Man of Steel movie, and you've never heard it told like this before. And if you haven't already subscribed to our channel, please do so now, and give us a thumbs up if you want more videos like this. Also, consider supporting the channel by getting one of these limited collector's edition designs. Use coupon code THEPOPCAST at checkout for a nice discount. There will be a link at the end of this video. Thank you for the support. Ever since Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster sold Superman to Detective Comics in 1938, the Man of Steel had captured the imagination of the world, first in comic strips, then in comic books, on the radio, TV, and finally on the big screen.
Look who's here again. I told you I'd be back.
When the Silver Age of comic books began in the 1960s, Warner Brothers watched the rise of Marvel as they were looking for opportunities to expand their entertainment holdings. DC had dominated comics in the 1950s golden era, and it appeared they might get a boost with Marvel. So in 1969, Warner Brothers decided to buy DC and the hundreds of interesting characters that came with it. And while initially the focus was on comics, they knew they'd be able to capitalize on featuring DC characters on TV and in movies. But when Adam West's campy Batman TV series was treated like a joke by Hollywood, the entire industry was left with a bad taste in its mouth for superheroes.
Do you always sneak up on people like that?
No.
So when the Salkind family asked if they could make Superman movies in 1973, Warner Brothers executives had a nice little chuckle and said, sure, why not? In fact, go ahead and make them for the next 25 years. Little did they know, The Salkinds and director Richard Donner were about to make superheroes cool again, thanks to Christopher Reeve's cast and crew.
Who are you?
A friend.
It was a huge mistake. 1978's Superman the movie was a huge hit. And for Warner Brothers, it was a huge mistake. But while they still made a lot of money distributing 5 super movies from 1978 to 1987, had they controlled the projects themselves, they would have made a lot more money. But the Salkinds had the rights to make Superman movies until 1999, and there wasn't anything the studio could do about it. That was until 1993. The Salkinds were planning to make Superman 5, but lost $40 million of their own money making Christopher Columbus the Discovery, which essentially put him out of the movie-making business. Warner Brothers was able to reacquire the rights, and now, with full control, they launched Superman into a golden age of movie-making, right? Well, not exactly.
I'm like, but Superman's dead at this point. He's like, I know, but can't Brainiac fight something else up there? And I was like, well, like what? He's like, what about like Superman's guards as soldiers? And I'm like, why would Superman need guards?
Now with the rights to make Superman movies again, Warner Brothers got busy on their next movie. They had just launched the first live-action Superman TV series since 1958 with 1992's Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman.
You will pay for this, Kent, I swear.
But the studio wanted to replicate the success of Christopher Reeve's Superman. So in 1993, while Lois and Clark were playing in primetime, Warner Brothers began production on a new Superman movie inspired by the previous year's DC comic event, The Death of Superman. John Peters, who'd produced the very successful 1989 Batman movie, was brought in to help do the same for Superman. The first screenplay, titled Superman Reborn, would have had the Man of Steel facing Doomsday and ending with both of them dying. Superman would release his soul into Lois's body, with her becoming pregnant with his child, who would then go on to take over the franchise. Warner Brothers rejected 2 scripts, which forced Peters to change direction and go with an idea Clerks director Kevin Smith had called Superman Lives. Tim Burton was hired to infuse his success with Batman, and Nicolas Cage was attached to play Superman. This movie would have featured not only the death of Superman, but also a merging of Brainiac and Lex Luthor to create Luthiac. Yes, we aren't joking.
I said, okay, really?
Pre-production went on for several years, but when Warner Brothers hit a series of stinker films in 1997, the studio started asking how much this Superman movie was going to cost. With Warner Brothers losing an incredible amount of money, and the realization that making this movie was going to have an astronomical cost, 3 weeks before production was supposed to begin, the studio, ultimately scared Burton wouldn't be able to pull off a commercially successful Superman movie, pulled the plug.
I was going to play Superman, and that fell apart for whatever the reasons. I was going to turn that character upside down along with Tim Burton.
Warner Brothers wouldn't get the courage to go back to Superman again until 2001, when they were pitched the idea of a Batman vs. Superman movie that would have had the Joker and Lex Luthor masterminding a battle to the death between the 2 superheroes. With director Wolfgang Peterson attached and a script by Akiva Goldsman, filming was planning to start in early 2003. Matt Damon and Josh Hartnett were being considered for Superman, but when J.J. Abrams submitted a script entitled Superman Flyby, the studio decided it wanted to take Batman and Superman in their own movie directions. Abrams' movie would be a Superman origin story where Krypton is not destroyed, but instead in a civil war, and Kal-El is sent to Earth to fulfill a prophecy. Josh Hartnett and Jude Law were approached to play Superman, with Anthony Hopkins as Jor-El, Ralph Fiennes as Lex Luthor, and Christopher Walken as Perry White. Christopher Reeve, who was supposed to be a project consultant on Flyby, suggested Tom Welling, who was already playing Clark Kent on Smallville since it aired on the WB network in 2001. McG, who had come off of Charlie's Angels, was hired to direct. He would do test footage with future Superman Henry Cavill before eventually dropping out of the project to direct Charlie's Angels Full Throttle. It was now 2004, and after 11 years, Warner Brothers still hadn't been able to get a Superman movie off the ground. What were they going to have to do to get this movie made? Get Richard Donner back? No, but as it would turn out, the person they did need lived in the same house with him.
Hey, what do you think of his job on Superman, the comeback of
The kid?
Superman, yeah.
At about the same time Warner Brothers was trying to get Wolfgang Petersen's Batman vs. Superman off the ground in 2002, Bryan Singer was about to begin production on X2, his second X-Men movie. The director broke into the industry with his 1995 unexpected hit, The Usual Suspects, which launched the career of Kevin Spacey.
Like that, he's gone.
With the success of the film, 20th Century Fox initially offered him 1997's Alien Resurrection, but decided instead to give him a comic book movie they were working on called X-Men. His huge success with the X-Men would credit Singer with revitalizing the superhero movie genre and helping launch a superhero renaissance in cinema. Helping Singer produce the X-Men movies was the Donner's Company, made up of Superman 1978 director Richard Donner and his wife Lauren. Singer was a huge fan of Superman, including the George Reeves television series and especially Richard Donner's film. When they were in the middle of making the second X-Men movie X2, Singer got word that Warner Brothers was working on the Batman vs. Superman movie, and it got him thinking about what he'd do if he was making that movie. Then he asked himself, what if I was just making a Superman movie? He was just flirting with the idea, but one night, when he was in Austin, Texas in a hotel room with the Donners, he asked them if he could talk to them about something. What would you think if I made a Superman movie? He gave Richard a vague idea of what he wanted to do, including continuing the story about Superman that the director had started. Donner thought it was a great idea, and Singer felt like he got the blessing his heart and mind required to really go for it. Singer then approached Warner Brothers with his idea, but they were totally committed to the Batman vs. Superman movie, so Singer moved on and completed X2 in 2003, which, like the first X-Men movie, was very successful.
The next move is yours.
In March 2004, Warner Brothers brought in Singer to work on a remake of the 1976 movie Logan's Run.
Isn't that what you do? Kill?
Killed? Why do you use that word?
Once McG had dropped out of Superman Flyby and the studio saw how quickly Singer was moving on Logan's Run, they reconsidered his Superman idea. Warner Brothers agreed to put everything aside that they'd worked on up to that point and let Singer pursue his idea. The plan was for Singer to finish Logan's Run and then make Superman. But after working with his team and excitedly fleshing out 30 pages of a treatment in a day, Singer decided to change course. Superman Returns would be made now.
He was Superman. Everyone was in love with him.
When Richard Donner made his 1978 Superman movie, he was a huge fan of the Man of Steel, and he was hell-bent on getting the character right. But like Donner was obsessed with Superman, Singer was equally obsessed with Donner's movie about Superman.
Swell.
And this would ultimately end up being the core reason behind Superman Returns' perceived failure.
You know,
We'll go deeper into that shortly, but the important thing to know here is that Singer was looking to continue where Donner had left off.
Spare me.
Donner had shot about 80% of Superman 2 before another director would end up coming in and completing the movie.
revenge.
Revenge.
Revenge!
But Superman 3 and 4 didn't follow Donner's direction at all. If you'd like to learn more about this story, check out our most recent project, The Definitive History of Christopher Reeve's Superman, right after this video.
Develop such conviction in yourself, Elal. Kal-El. Ralph. Whatever your name is.
Just cut. We'll just pick it up.
Singer had always wondered what happened to Superman after that second movie, and he was excited to explore that idea. He, like many Superman fans, wanted to keep the Richard Donner, Christopher Reeve good times going, and it would be hard for anyone who identified that Superman as their Superman to disagree with that idea. But the question was, could he find another Christopher Reeve?
Hi.
When Singer started looking for his Superman, he first looked at the test screenings that had already been done by other directors. He lingered over Henry Cavill for a moment. He had been good in The Count of Monte Cristo and looked like Superman, but Singer thought he looked too young. The director moved on, but he was certain he wanted an unknown actor in the red cape, just like Donner had done. Another of those test screenings that had been done under McG was with a guy named Brandon Routh.
And I am testing for the role of Clark Kent, aka Superman.
Routh even auditioned for the role of Clark Kent in Smallville, losing out to Welling. The 24-year-old was signed by his manager because of his resemblance to Christopher Reeve and told Routh he thought he would easily be cast in any future Superman movies. Even Reeve's widow, Dana Reeve, would comment that Routh's physical appearance was strikingly similar to her husband's. But Singer saw exactly what Routh's manager had seen, and in September 2004, decided to invite the actor to meet him at Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf on Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood. The director said to himself, the guy was either physically going to be right for the part or not, and he would know in 20 seconds whether he was Superman. Routh was sitting when he arrived, so Singer grabbed them both a cup of coffee and went over and asked if he wanted to sit outside. Routh said sure, and when he stood up, Singer remembers him just going up and up and up.
I think I actually let out an audible scream.
The director actually said, whoa. He was definitely big enough to play Superman. They went outside and talked for 2 hours. Routh had grown up in the Midwest, and Singer remembers loving his values and how genuine he was. Routh had grown up in Norwalk, Iowa. Interestingly, only about 100 miles south of the birthplace of Superman's first television star, George Reeves. But what are the odds that in a 6,000-person town, Routh would end up going to a 500-student high school with another famous superhero? That's right, Routh and future Aquaman star Jason Momoa not only went to the same tiny high school together, but they played on the same soccer team.
My man!
Needless to say, Singer felt like Routh embodied the spirit of the character, and by the time he left the meeting, he knew he'd found his Superman.
No comment. I think this is the guy.
Jim Caviezel expressed interest in the role, but Singer never seriously considered anyone but Routh. The actor would take Reeves' path by adding 20 pounds of muscle prior to production to transform himself into the son of Krypton. Coincidentally, during that 2-hour meeting with Routh, Singer would get a call. It was Kevin Spacey's manager. They had been discussing Spacey for the role of Lex Luthor from the beginning of the director's involvement. The director and actor had been looking for a movie to work on together after enjoying the experience in The Usual Suspects. Singer knew he wanted Spacey for the villain, as he would be able to convey the complicated nature of Luthor. He'd told the actor Lex was going to be darker, bitter, and he's going to be out for revenge. Those were the words that got Spacey to take the role before ever reading a script. On top of that, he just trusted Singer completely. Spacey hadn't been idle since The Usual Suspects. The actor had been fighting his way into the industry for 10 years before Suspects and was going to capitalize on that unexpected success. He grew his reputation as a serious, complicated actor in roles in 1995's Seven, 1997's LA Confidential, and 1999's American Beauty.
Smile! You're at Mr. Smiley's.
You are so busted.
Was Spacey the right actor to play Lex Luthor? Well, look no further than who was chosen to play the movie version of Dr. Evil in 2002's Austin Powers Goldmember, Kevin Spacey.
Watch your friggin' self, because this is one doctor who does make house calls.
So Singer was right. He was the guy, and to this day, he is frequently considered by most to be the most accurate Lex Luthor of any movie iteration. The role of Lois Lane would go to 22-year-old Kate Bosworth, who found her way into acting by way of horses. A champion equestrian at age 14, she attended an open casting call for the support part of Judith in the 1998 film The Horse Whisperer. The producers needed someone who was an exceptional rider, and because of that, Bosworth got the role. And with that, she also got the acting bug. After a small part in 2000's Remember the Titans, she had her breakthrough role as the lead in 2002's surfing film Blue Crush, where she packed 15 pounds of muscle onto her frame. But her path to Superman Returns came via Kevin Spacey. They had just finished making the 2004 movie Beyond the Sea together. So when Singer told his Lex Luthor he was having trouble casting Lois Lane, Kevin suggested he watch their new movie and give Bosworth a look. Singer saw the movie a couple of times and eventually invited her in for a screen test with Routh. It was in a white room with just a little tripod camera. They did the first scene with Clark Kent, and she remembered him being perfectly clumsy and fumbling, and then when they did the Superman scene, he just shifted his balance and stood a bit straighter, and she felt totally lost in the scene. It must have been one heck of a testing because, according to Routh, when Bosworth left, the whole room was speechless. But if they wanted an accurate portrayal of their on-screen chemistry, perhaps they should have done it with James Marsden in the room. Fortunately or unfortunately, perhaps fortunately, considering his career, James Marsden has had the opportunity to be cucked not once, not twice, not 3 times, but 4 times in huge movies.
For those of you unfamiliar with William Shakespeare, a cuckold is a man whose woman is cheating on him.
First in X-Men, and then in 2004 in The Notebook, again in Superman Returns, then again a year later in the movie Enchanted. Marsden, whose successful performance as unlucky love interest Cyclops in X-Men, gave Singer the idea that he'd be perfect as Perry White's nephew Richard / Lois Lane's love stand-in for Superman because he is really good at playing a guy in a romantic relationship where the girl doesn't choose him. A situation that might kill a guy in real life, but Marsden literally built his acting foundation on it. You lose the love of your life to Wolverine, Ryan Gosling, Superman, and Patrick Dempsey, a guy can only take so much.
You alright? Where have you been?
For the part of Jimmy Olsen, Singer wasn't done cherry-picking from the X-Men. He offered the role to Shawn Ashmore, who played Iceman. His twin brother Aaron had played the role of Jimmy Olsen in Smallville, so it was an interesting idea. But Aaron declined due to his commitments to X-Men: The Last Stand. The role would instead go to Sam Huntington, who had played opposite Tim Allen in the 1997 movie Jungle to Jungle. If it hasn't been obvious yet that Singer likes to work with people he's worked with before, Hugh Laurie was initially cast as Perry White. Singer, who had directed the pilot episode of the TV series House, was primarily responsible for casting, and Laurie was instantly magical in the role. At this point, it was obvious why Singer was being credited as a rare talent scout after launching Kevin Spacey, Hugh Jackman, and now Hugh Laurie. Routh must have felt like he was in good hands. But when Laurie was unable to film after House picked up a second season...
You can't tell him the truth, so you want me to lie to him.
Would you?
Close your legs.
Frank Langella, who Singer had enjoyed watching play Dracula in 1979, was picked for the part.
Superman Returns. Come on.
For the role of 5-year-old Jason White / Superman's son, the role would go to Tristan Lake LeBeau in what would be his first movie. The young actor would go on to win a Daytime Emmy for his role on The Young and the Restless in 2018. And the last notable castings would be Parker Posey, known for 1993's Dazed and Confused, and Cal Penn, who was known for 2004's Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle.
No, we've gone too far.
The pair would be cast as Lex Luthor's snarky lover and his henchman, respectively.
No, keep going.
Warner Brothers had been set on filming in Australia ever since McG was still attached to the film. Originally, they wanted to film at Village Roadshow Studios in the Gold Coast, Queensland, so they could use their sets as an attraction to create an adjoining Warner Brothers world theme park. As things would turn out, that venture was too expensive. So set construction started at Fox Studios in Sydney in January 2005 under the fake working title Red Sun. Filming began in late March and lasted until November. Filming on all 9 sound stages injected more than $100 million into the New South Wales economy, hiring thousands of local workers. The Kent farm was originally built on a soundstage, but it was ultimately disassembled and moved on location to Breeza. And that had its own complications, as Australia was going through a severe drought at that time, and workers had to plant 37 acres of corn to recreate the Kent farm. The Australian Museum became the Metropolis Museum of Natural History, where Luther steals the shard of kryptonite. Something important to Singer is that he wanted Reeve to make a cameo appearance in the film, but sadly he passed away before filming in October. For this reason, he would dedicate the movie to Christopher and his wife Dana. And since Singer was essentially trying to recast Reeve's Superman, the 25-year-old Ralph, who had brown eyes, was required to wear blue contact lenses for filming. Some other really interesting facts about the production include there were nearly 1,400 visual effects shots. This was also the last feature film for both Noel Neill and Jack Larson, who played the rich, dying, short-lived widow of Lex Luthor, Gertrude Vanderworth, and Bo the bartender, respectively. Neill had been Lois Lane and Larson had been Jimmy Olsen in the classic George Reeves' 1950s Superman TV show. One of the things Singer had been adamant about was using the original John Williams Superman music. He said if he hadn't been allowed to use the music, he wouldn't have made the movie. John Ottman was brought in to compose and edit the film. He made sure to preserve the Williams score right down to every single note for the opening titles. He likes to think of his work on Superman Returns as an homage to Williams. Excitement for Returns was ramped up when Warner Brothers and Singer promoted the upcoming movie with 4 minutes of edited footage for 7,000 fans at the 2005 San Diego Comic-Con in July. Singer and Returns screenwriters Michael Dougherty and Dan Harris also came up with the idea of publishing a prequel limited 4-magazine comic book series. They also published 27 behind-the-scenes video diaries that were released on bluetights.net. At the end of filming in November, a teaser trailer for the movie debuted during the theatrical release of Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. Post-production would continue, and the first main theatrical trailer was released in theaters May 5th alongside Mission Impossible 3. Finally, on June 28, 2006, Superman Returns released in the United States and Canada in 4,065 theaters. It would be the first movie converted to IMAX 3D and become the 9th highest-grossing film of 2006 worldwide, just behind Mission Impossible 3 and just ahead of Happy Feet. The second installment of the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise would crack $1 billion and be only the third movie to do it behind 1998's Titanic and 2003's Return of the King. The expectations from Warner Brothers had been very high, and perhaps they could understand losing to Pirates, but in 2006, Superman was also crushed by The Da Vinci Code, Ice Age 2, Casino Royale, Night at the Museum, Cars, and even X-Men The Last Stand, which was the project Singer left Fox to do Superman Returns. Ouch. Returns would end up earning $391 million, which should have been a win, but after a budget of around $263 million when you include development costs going back to the 90s, and an estimate of $1 million spent on marketing, and the movie barely paid for itself. A year earlier, Batman Begins had only earned $373 million, but the budget had been $150 million and the studio had lower expectations after the poor reception of 1997's Batman and Robin. So, behind the scenes, Warner Brothers was not happy with Superman Returns. It was supposed to launch a whole new Superman franchise for the studio, and Singer had plans to make Superman Returns 2 The Man of Steel, promising a more action-oriented sequel with Ralph taking on Brainiac. In fact, 4 months before the release of Returns in February, the studio had already announced a mid-2009 release date for the sequel. The critics had been mostly positive with Superman Returns, but while fans felt the Richard Donner Christopher Reeve nostalgia, the overall response to the film was lukewarm. Despite this, Singer was planning to move forward, dropping out of Logan's Run to focus on Superman. With filming set to begin in mid-2007, a new project was grabbing the director's attention. The movie was Valkyrie, which would star Tom Cruise. The studio had already limited the Superman sequel budget to $175 million, and with Singer perhaps feeling the studio's lack of excitement, decided to move forward with United Artists on the World War II film. The Superman sequel was pushed back to March 2008, but writers Doherty and Harris left for other opportunities. And if Superman Returns: The Man of Steel didn't have enough bad karma, Hollywood went into a 4-month writer's strike in November 2007, pushing a release date for the film to 2010. In March 2008, Singer said the sequel was still important to him. Filming would have to start at the beginning of 2009, as Ralph's Superman contract was set to expire later that year. But something happened in 2008 that would change everything. Warner Brothers would get their billion-dollar movie.
And here we go.
Christopher Nolan's Batman sequel, The Dark Knight, sent a message to Warner Brothers that was loud and clear. Realistic and gritty superheroes were on the menu moving forward. A month after the release of The Dark Knight, in August 2008, the studio officially announced they intended to reboot the Superman franchise. Singer and Ralph were out. The studio's official answer to why Superman Returns didn't get its sequel is that they expected the movie to make $500 million outside the United States. I mean, it's a fair expectation. Superman is beloved around the world, and the Da Vinci Code had done it.
Da Vinci.
Surely Superman was poised to do better, but it had only earned a paltry $191 million in other countries. Initially, Singer had been beside himself, saying, "That movie made $400 million. I don't know what constitutes underperforming these days."
No, it's more of a, you know.
He would go on to complain that the movie opened up against The Devil Wears Prada, and all the women went to that movie.
Miranda hired me. She knows what I look like.
Do you?
But over time, he'd eventually recognize his mistakes. When it comes to Superman Returns, his biggest mistake was success itself. 4 super successful movies in a row, and the launching of a top TV series, and as studios were apt to do when a director can't lose, they let him do whatever he wanted. And why not? He had Richard Donner's approval, he had reinvigorated superhero movies through the X-Men, he was the master of finding new talent, and from a studio's perspective, he was a sure thing. And no matter how hard you try, when everyone around you thinks you can't lose, you start to believe it as well. And that's when human beings start making mistakes. And for Singer, that begins with, what is your movie about? Is it a direct sequel to Superman 2, or is it a nostalgic nod to Richard Donner's work?
I'd like to say it's nostalgia, but...
The first thing Singer was guilty of is having his movie be about an idea or a feeling, as opposed to telling a story that either continues or it doesn't. But make up your mind and move forward with a clear purpose. Roger Ebert would argue Superman Returns was a glum, lackluster movie in which the big effects sequences seemed dutiful instead of exhilarated. He said Ralph lacks charisma as Superman, surmising he must have been cast because he looks a little like Reeve. And at 22 years old, Bosworth was too young to portray Lois Lane. Talk about getting to the heart of it.
Remember the first movie where you believe a man can fly? This movie's gonna be, you won't believe how fucking boring this man is.
Donner had once said, if we can get the romance to work between Superman and Lois, his movie would be a success. But that wasn't true. He just needed to make a man fly, as it had never been done before on the big screen. And he nailed that. Singer also felt like the key to success of his movie was the romance between Superman and Lois. He would later admit that while he was making the film for Christopher Reeve's Superman fans, he was also making the film for women who wouldn't ordinarily come to a superhero movie, and that usually doesn't work out very well. Hence the complicated romantic triangle between Lois, Superman, and Richard White, and a kid. And like we mentioned earlier, Donner was making a Superman movie while Singer was trying to make a Donner Superman movie. Ultimately, Singer got lost in the nostalgia and romance and forgot that after nearly 20 years on the big screen, fans wanted to see Superman in action. A lot.
A lot.
At 154 minutes, Superman Returns is a long film already, and that was after he cut out 15 minutes of the movie, but not because he had test screenings that gave him unbiased feedback on what might be wrong with the film. He managed to convince Warner Brothers not to do that.
No, man.
No, he showed a few select friends and family members and took their feedback into consideration. How many people close to you are going to tell you the truth? The biggest problem of the film starts right at the beginning. Superman has been gone for 5 years. He went to Krypton because he thought it still might be there. What?
What?
Remember how confusing that was? But here is something you didn't know. Singer had shot a $10 million scene of Superman going to Krypton in a crystal ship to find out for himself. In fact, Lex Luthor falsified signs of life coming from there and sent Superman on a fool's errand. That would have been cool to see, as well as set a tone for the film that may have helped audiences lock in earlier. But Singer cut the very expensive scene because he just felt like the movie didn't need it. How about removing that whole Superman peeping Tom scene and keeping the cool trip to Krypton?
Okay, that was creepy.
And while Ralph didn't have the Reeve twinkle and he wasn't remotely as good playing Clark, he wasn't a horrible Superman. No, the real mistake comes with the casting of Lois, the kid, and the love triangle. It just doesn't make sense.
Doesn't make sense.
The events of Returns takes place 5 years after Superman 2, which would have given us an early to mid-30s Lois Lane at the very least. Superman ages slower than humans, so okay, Ralph works. But at 22, Bosworth just doesn't work. This is an example of Singer needing honest feedback. Spacey tells him this girl is great. Somehow the screen test works, I guess. But then she and Superman have almost no chemistry in the movie? Lois seems to actually downright despise Clark. Margot Kidder thought Clark was a chump, but she cared for him deeply. Bosworth comes across with downright contempt. She chose not to watch Donner's Superman movies so she wouldn't be influenced by Kidder and instead based Lois on Katharine Hepburn. Why would you not want to be a similar Lois Lane? Again, is this a sequel or not? I guess the actors didn't think so. Producers considered Jennifer Connelly for Lois Lane prior to Bosworth. A 35-year-old smart and gorgeous Connelly as Lois Lane? Yes.
Oh, hell yeah.
Even 28-year-old Amy Adams was considered and would have been better, although she would eventually be cast as Lois Lane in the next reboot. And put aside the fact that 22-year-old Bosworth's Lane has a 5-year-old son with the Man of Steel, but who is this Richard guy and why is he in my Superman movie? Forget the fact that every scene is awkward and uncomfortable, but what happens when this guy finds out Jason White is not his kid? And in the end, Lois picks Richard over Superman even though she is still in love with Superman, and Richard doesn't know Jason is his kid. What was this script inspired by? Jerry Springer? Why am I getting Dawson's Creek vibes? Imagine you haven't seen Superman on the big screen in almost 2 decades. As a fan, you are so hyped, and then what you get is a 2-hour and 34-minute weird love triangle with one cool Superman action scene where he saves the shuttle and a 747.
Superman doesn't throw a single fucking punch.
And Lex Luthor is yet again scamming for real estate? What a waste of Kevin Spacey's talent. I mean, is the super genius Lex Luthor obsessed with anything besides land? Because apparently between 1978 and 2006, that's all that's been on his mind.
Kitty, what did my father used to say to me?
You're losing your hair?
In the end, Singer had his heart in the right place, but he was blind as to what Superman fans want from a Superman movie, even Donner Reeve fans. And because he had no limitations and no unbiased opinions, Superman Returns, while giving off some nice nostalgia, mainly through John Williams' music, the movie is really just a cautionary tale that studios could use to control future directors. Superman Returns would get a novelization and a video game in 2007. Ralph's career didn't get the boost he was expecting as a result of playing Superman.
I have a better understanding of what happened then.
But he'd finally land a memorable role as Todd Ingram in 2010's Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, where again he has superpowers. Also in 2010, Ralph landed the role as Daniel Shaw in the TV show Chuck. In 2016, he would be cast as Ray Palmer, the Atom, on DC's Legends of Tomorrow. And in 2019, he would finally reprise his role one more time as Superman in the CW Arrowverse's Crisis on Infinite Earth Parts 2 and 3.
It's a very special one for me, being back in blue.
I made a promise keep fighting, no matter what.
Singer would go on to make Jack the Giant Slayer in 2013, X-Men Days of Future Past in 2014, and X-Men Apocalypse in 2016. In 2018, he was fired at the end of directing the Queen biopic Bohemian Rhapsody after a series of absences from the London production. In 2019, allegations of sexual abuse against minors surfaced in an Atlantic article following a 12-month investigation that detailed the story of 4 alleged victims who said they were seduced and molested by the director while underage. Singer denies all charges and, as of this video, is living in Israel with plans to continue his film career at some point in that country. In a 2009 New York Times interview, filmmaker and screenwriter Quentin Tarantino declared his appreciation for Singer's work on Superman Returns. He loved the film, believing that Singer should have won Best Director at Cannes for his work on the movie. He said he was working on a 20-page review of the film at that time. And while his review has never been made public, the prolific director saw something in Singer's work that perhaps others have missed. On May 13, 2011, Ralph's Superman suit was shown to fans one more time when it was featured in the finale of the Smallville TV series. The show's producers were offered Christopher Reeve's suit, but they felt like Ralph's would fit in better with the world they had created. And remember, without the failure of this movie, Zack Snyder, Henry Cavill fans would never get the Superman movies that begin in 2013. But that's a story for another day.
How about
Excuse me.
Love it or hate it, Superman Returns has a distinctive place in the story of Superman. And this is where we say, despite some of the criticism we lay out here, if you love Superman Returns and Brandon Routh is your Superman, that's okay, we won't judge you. That's for everyone in the comments section to do. Kidding. We all have guilty pleasures we don't want to be judged for. I still watch Star Trek V: The Final Frontier every couple of years. So, yeah.
I apologize.
But seriously, what do you think? Did you like Brandon Routh, Bryan Singer's Superman, or was it a missed opportunity? Where does Brandon Routh rank in your all-time favorite Supermen? Where do you rank Superman Returns in all your Superman movies? Lastly, who do you think should have been cast in these roles instead? Share with us your favorite moments and stories from the movie in the comments below. We'd love to talk with you about it. If you enjoyed this definitive history and would like to hear the behind-the-scenes stories of how we made it and perhaps some of the things we left out, just click on the join button and become a member of the channel, where we host live interactive shows after each video. And once again, thank you for supporting the channel. We couldn't do this without you. A link is about to pop up that will take you directly to these limited collector's edition designs. Every dollar earned goes towards making our next video. Don't forget to get a nice discount by using coupon code THEPOPCAST. Thank you so much. Until next time,